Hi, fifth graders. We're here to continue on with our read aloud of One Crazy Summer. We're going to continue on with chapters 2 and 3, but first, let's do a recap of chapter 1 here. So, what we know so far: the three sisters were on the plane to Oakland when we left off. They were taken to the airport by their grandmother, Big Ma. Remember, she takes really good care of them. Some other family members we learned about was Pa. He lives with them and he's a little bit sick. And then there was their Uncle Darnell, who was in the army, but he spent some time with them in Brooklyn. Cecile, their mother, she lives in Oakland, California. We learned about her and that they're going to visit her after she has lived apart from them for many years. We learned that she was abandoning them. She had abandoned them 7 years ago when Delphine was a young girl still. And then we also learned that during this time period in 1968, we were learning about the setting, how the girls are being confronted with some like inequalities and separateness, especially when they were in the airport. So Delphine kind of described it as like an us versus them type atmosphere. So that was our quick recap. Let's continue on. All right, so we also want to make sure we set up our lens, as we always do when we read our fiction texts. We want to set this ourselves up for success. We're going to be thinking about characters, major and minor ones, their traits, and if there's any relationships that we notice. We're going to be thinking about point of view, how the narrator feels about the problems that she faces. We're going to be maybe thinking about themes a little bit, lessons that the characters are learning, and then definitely we're going to keep our eye out for any changes we see in the character or any changes we see in the setting. These are important places to stop and think. Okay, so let's get started here with chapter 2. It's called Golden Gate Bridge, and right away I'm kind of wondering, why did the author title the chapter this way? The author titled this chapter this name of the Golden Gate Bridge for a reason. Maybe it's a symbol for something. So let's dive right in. I glanced at my Timex. Among the three of us, I was the only one responsible enough to wear and keep a wristwatch. Vanetta let a girl see hers and never got it back. Fern was still learning to tell time, so I kept hers in my drawer until she was ready to wear it. 6.5 hours had passed since we'd hugged Big Ma and kissed Pa at JFK Airport. The clouds had made peace with our Boeing 727. It was safe to breathe. I stretched as far as my legs could go. With these long legs, I'm taken for 12 or 13 or even a little older. No one ever guesses 11 going on 12 on their first try. More than my long legs, I'm sure it's my plain face that throws them off. Not plain as in homely plain, but even plain, steady. I'm not 9 or 7 and given to squealing or oohing like Vanetta and Fern. I just let my plain face and my plain words speak for me. That way, no one ever says, huh, to me. They know exactly what I mean. So let's just pause a second there. Let's think. Delphine is different than her other sisters, it seems, not just because of her age. Let's notice how the author lets us in on her inner thinking, like when she was talking about how people think of her. It says everyone knows exactly what I mean when I talk. These are her inner thoughts, and it's helping us to see who she is as a person. We're getting this idea that she's a strong girl, aside from just being older than her sisters. We were long gone from the thick white clouds, the plane steadily climbing down. The intercom cracked, and the pilot made his announcement about the descent and altitude, and that we would be landing in about 10 minutes. I let all that pass by until he said, "And to your left, as we circle the bay, is the Golden Gate Bridge." Bing, 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 bing. That's what the chapter's titled. I was now a liar, a stone-faced liar. I wanted to squeal and ooh like a 7-year-old meeting Tinkerbell. I had read about the Golden Gate Bridge in class, the California gold rush, the Chinese immigrants building the railroads, connecting the East to the West. It wasn't every day that you saw a live picture of what you read about in your textbook. I wanted to look down from above the world and see the Golden Gate Bridge. Being stuck in the middle seat, I was mad at myself. Of the three of us, I was the first to board the 727. Why hadn't I taken the chance to take the window seat when I'd had the chance? Instead of the squeal I knew wouldn't come out of me in the first place, I sighed. No use crying about it now. This is her inner conflict here. She really wants to see it and squeal, but she's like, oh, I gotta be strong here. I gotta be the responsible one. No use crying about it now. The truth was, one pout from either Vanetta or Fern, and I would have given up that window seat. So let's think about this a little bit here. The character is showing us Delphine's role as her sister. She seems to be the kind of sister who puts her siblings first. She's really looking out for them, and she's willing to give them even things that she desires in place of herself. She wants to do the best for them. This was the only way it could be. Vanetta and Fern on either side of me, in between them. 6.5 hours was too long a time to have Vanetta and Fern strapped side by side, picking at each other. We would have been the grand Negro spectacle that Big Ma had scolded us about becoming when we were back in Brooklyn. Still, the Golden Gate Bridge was getting away from me. I figured at least one of us should get to see it, and that should be I should be the one, and that should be the one who read about it in class. Look, Vanetta, look down at the bridge. Vanetta stayed tight to the stubborn curl, her chin in her lap. I'm not looking. Oh, we know that the main problem here so far, okay, we know that it's that the mother abandoned them. But a smaller problem seems to be developing in this chapter here. Delphine really wants to see this bridge, but it's not turning out the way that she desired. The problem is that her sisters are getting in the way here. It's not a huge problem, but maybe it does stand for something more here. I turned to my right, and I got a mouthful of hair and barrettes. Fern had leaned over from her aisle seat. I want to see, make her switch. To Fern, the Golden Gate Bridge sounded like a Sleeping Beauty's castle. She halfway believed in the things not true and didn't know where the fairy tales ended. No use spoiling it for her now. She'd figure things out soon enough. Fern was wriggling out of her seatbelt and climbing on me to get a glimpse. This was how it was at home. Why should 1,000 feet up in the air make any difference? Sit back, Fern, I said in my plain, firm voice. We're getting ready to land. She pouted, but sat back down. I tightened her seatbelt. Vanetta's face stayed on her lap. This was just pitiful. Go look down, Vanetta, I said, before you miss it. Oh, what a shame. Delphine wants to see it and she can't, and then the other sisters can see it, but they don't want to. We're learning a bit about Vanetta and Fern here, about how maybe immature they are and stuck in their ways they might be. Maybe it's not their fault because they are younger, but also we are, learning some valuable things about the type of girls that they are. Vanetta refused to pry her chin from her lap. Very stubborn. She stuck her thumb back in her mouth and closed her eyes. I wasn't worried about Vanetta. Oh, here's some more info about each of the sisters. Listen. I wasn't worried about Vanetta. Once we got onto the ground, she'd be her old, showy self again, and this fraidy cat episode would be long faded. So as we continued to circle the bay above the Golden Gate Bridge, I felt like I was being teased for the simple act of wanting. Each time the plane curved around, I knew in my heart it would be my last chance, and the bridge was saying, nah, 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 you can't see me. Now I had to see the bridge. How many times would I be this high up and have a sight as spectacular as the Golden Gate Bridge right underneath me? I loosened my seatbelt, lifted myself, and leaned over Vanetta's head and shoulders to get a look out of the oval window. I pressed against Vanetta, just a little, not enough to cause a stir. But Vanetta and Fern, who was now angry, both hollered, Delphine! As loud as they could. They're gonna ruin it for her, aren't they? Heads turned our way. A stewardess rushed in to our row. Sit in your seat, missy, she scolded me. We're getting ready to land. This came up a little bit before to us in chapter 1 before, this us versus them issue. Listen, even though there were only 8 Negroes on board, counting my sisters and me, I had managed to disgrace the entire race. Judging by the head shaking and the tisk-tisking going on around us. Oh, as a reader, I'm feeling pretty bad for Delphine here. She really just wanted to see that bridge, and it's turned into this whole thing where they made a spectacle, exactly what Big Ma didn't want. I shifted my behind into my seat and tightened my seatbelt, but not before I had seen orange steel poking through that thick ground cloud below, smog. There was no time to savor my victory or feel my shame. Well, that line's interesting. Let me go back and read that again. There was no time to savor my victory or feel my shame. So this line is kind of interesting here. I wonder what the author means in that line when she describes how Delphine's feeling. It seems like Delphine is a little conflicted. She is happy she got to see the orange poking through the smog, but she also feels ashamed that she had to make that spectacle that she really was hoping not to. Oh man. The plane went roaring down further and further. Vanetta held onto my left arm, and Fern with Miss Pattycake grabbed my right. I dug into the armrests and prayed that the pilot had done this before. The plane bounced off the ground as soon as we hit land. It kept bouncing and surging forward until the bouncing smoothed out and we were rolling against the ground, nice and steady. I took a deep breath so I'd sound like myself when I started telling Vanetta and Fern what to do. The main thing was that we were on the ground. We were in Oakland. All right. I'm glad that they got there finally. So let's summarize. Who was in this chapter and what new things did we learn about them? Well, it was Delphine and her sisters again, and we learned a little bit more about their relationship and the roles that each of them plays. What seemed important and what we were learning about the problem here? Well, they were worried about getting in trouble on the plane for making commotion, and it turned out it did happen a little bit. Also, we learn more about Delphine and the struggles that she has as the responsible older sibling. And how does this chapter connect to what we read earlier? Well, earlier we learned about their experiences leading up to the flight as they arrived to the airport, as well as we learned about their family history and why they were flying to go to Oakland from Brooklyn. So this connects to their experience on the flight and explains in part the roles the siblings have about how Delphine is sort of in charge. So the question now is, what kind of relationship do the three sisters have? What is Delphine's role? And so we always want to back it up with text evidence. So let's pause and think about that right now. All right, and so we're gonna zoom into chapter 3 now. Secret Agent Mother. The Negro lady with a snappy oval bag, remember her, the one that was dressed really nicely in the airport? She didn't give us a chance as she click-clacked on by. That was fine with me, although I'd tell Big Ma otherwise if she'd asked, just to keep her from worrying. And I'd make it short and simple. I only get caught if I try to spin too much straw. Ooh, that's an interesting vocab phrase there, spin too much straw. I think the narrator might mean like, if she tells a lie, she's gonna get caught. Spinning too much straw might be like a figurative phrase there to say like, if she's saying too many things that aren't true. It's an interesting phrase, and it's a good thing to stop and pause and think about phrases when we don't really know exactly what they mean. With both feet safely on the ground, Vanetta became her old self, her face shiny and searching. What do we call her? I'd gone over this with Vanetta and Fern many, many times. I told them long before Papa said we were going to meet her. I told them while we packed our suitcases that her name is Cecile. That's what you call her when people ask who she is. You say, she is our mother. Mother is a statement of fact. Cecile Johnson gave birth to us, yes. We came out of Cecile Johnson. In the animal kingdom, that makes her our mother. Every mammal on the planet has a mother, dead or alive, ran off or stayed put. Cecile Johnson, mammal birth giver, alive, and abandoner, is our mother. A statement of fact. Even in the song we sing when we miss having a mother, and not her, but a mother, period. We sing about mother. Mother's gotta go now, la la la. Never mommy, mom, mama, or ma. So let's listen here. I think the author's this is an interesting part, because from Delphine's perspective, the title of mother is really just like she said, a statement of fact. But I'm noticing here how the author compares other mother types. So listen to this comparison. Mommy gets up to give you a glass of water in the middle of the night. Mom invites your friends inside when it's raining. Mama burns your ears with a hot comb to make your hair look pretty for the class picture day. Ma is sore and worn out from wringing your wet clothes and hanging them to dry. Ma needs peace and quiet at the end of the day. We don't have one of those. We just have a statement of fact. Mother. Vanetta, Fern, and I stood next to the young redhead stewardess assigned to watch us until Cecile came forward. The stewardess reread the slip of paper in her hand and then eyed the big clock mounted by the arrival and departure board as if she had someplace else to be. She could have left me alone with my sisters. I certainly didn't need her. A man in navy overalls swept garbage off of the floor a few feet away from us. He went about his job with no expressions, sweeping cigarettes, packs, and gum wrappers into a dustpan that he emptied into a large trash can. If I were him, picking up after people who carelessly drop stuff on the ground, I'd be nothing but angry. They called it littering when you carelessly drop things. They call the careless folks who drop things by a cute little name, litterbug. But there's nothing cute about dropping things carelessly. Dropping garbage and having puppies shouldn't be called the same thing. Litter. I had a mind to write to Miss Webster about this. Puppies don't deserve to be called a litter like they've been dropped carelessly like garbage. And people who litter shouldn't be given a cute name for what they do. And at least the mother of litter sticks around and nurses her pups no matter how sharp their teeth are. Merriam-Webster was falling down on her job. How could she have gotten this so wrong? This part's pretty interesting here. This vocab word, litterbug, it kind of has multiple meanings for Delphine here. Notice how Delphine is kind of comparing litter, the idea of garbage, and a dog's litter of puppies. It's not the same thing. She's having this like, almost like this negative connotation because she was herself abandoned with her sisters. They were a litter in a sense. Vanetta asked me again, not because she was anxious to meet Cecile. Vanetta asked again so she could have her routine rehearsed in her head, her curtsy, her smile, and her greeting, leaving Fern and me to stand around like dumb dodos. She was practicing her role as the cute bouncy pup in the litter and asked yet again, Delphine, what do we call her? A large white woman came and stood before us, clapping her hands like we were on display at the Bronx Zoo. Oh my, what adorable dolls you are. My. She warbled like an opera singer. Her face was moon full and jelly soft, the cheeks and jaw framed by white whiskers. We said nothing. Oh, and so well behaved. Vanetta perked up to out pretty and outbehave us. I did as Big Ma had told me in our many talks on how to act around white people, and I said thank you, but I didn't add the ma'am for the whole thank you, ma'am. I'd never really heard anyone else say that in Brooklyn, only in the old movies on TV. And when we drove down to Alabama, people would say yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, in Alabama all the time. That old word was perfectly fine for Big Ma, just wasn't perfectly fine for me. The lady opened her pocketbook, took out a red-yellow change purse, and scooted coins around, searching for the right amount for adorable, well-behaved colored dolls. Big Ma would have thought it was grand, but Papa wouldn't have liked it 1 cent. Now it was my time to do what Papa had told me. See after my sisters. We're not allowed to take money from strangers, I said. I said it polite enough to suit Big Ma, but strong enough to suit Papa. The red-headed stewardess was appalled by my uppity behavior. Don't you know when someone is being nice to you? I put on my dumb dodo face to fake, not knowing what she meant. Man, that seems like an important line there. Why would Delphine put on her dumb dodo face to fake not knowing? Oh, this seems to be that problem again about how the girls are being treated based on their race. That the fact that Delphine thinks she has to almost lie about who she is. That's really upsetting. What was the sense of making the stewardess stand guard over us if she refused to protect us from strangers? She thought it was all right to have that large white woman gawk at us, talk to us, and buy our attention. We might as well have stood by ourselves. I didn't have to shift my eyes to see mile-long pouts on Vanetta and Fern. I didn't care. We weren't taking nothing from no strangers. The lady was all smiles and squeals. Her face shook with laughter. Oh, and so cute. She put all the nickels in Fern's hand and pinched her cheek faster than I could do anything about it and was gone, as big as she was. Vanetta grabbed Fern's hand, forced it open, and took a nickel, leaving our 2 coins in Fern's palm. No use telling them to hand over their money. They were always dreaming of penny candy, and I let them keep their nickels in mine. The stewardess re-examined the slip of paper. She shifted from one leg to the other. Both my sisters and me and her high heels were bothering her. I looked around the crowd of people pacing and pacing. Papa didn't keep any pictures of Cecile, but I had a sense of her. Fuzzy flashes of her always came and went. But I knew she was big, as in tall, and Hershey-colored like me. I knew I, at least, had that right. Then something made me look over to my left at a figure standing by the cigarette machine. She moved, then moved back, maybe deciding whether to come to us or not. I told the stewardess before the figure could slip out of the airport. Yep, that's her. Fern and Vanetta were excited and scared. They squeezed my hands tight. I could see any thoughts Vanetta had about reciting poetry, tap dancing, and curtsying vanished. She squeezed my hand harder than Fern did. Wow, this is the big moment here. They're gonna meet the mother. The stewardess marched us on over to the figure. Once we were there, face to face, the stewardess stopped in her tracks and made herself a barrier between the strange woman and us. The same stewardess who let the large white woman gawk at us and press money into Fern's hands wasn't so quick to hand us over to the woman I said was our mother. I wanted to be mad, but I couldn't say I blamed her entirely. It could have been that way. It could have been the way that the woman was dressed. Big black shades, scarf tied around her head. Let's visualize this here, what Ma looked like, what Cecile looked like. Over the scarf, a big hat tilted down, the kind that Pa wore with a suit, and a pair of man's pants. So she definitely stands out a little. Delphina first remembered Cecile, her mother, in the flashes that she had from her memory, but I'm wondering how she's feeling now at this moment, now that she finally sees her in person again, for real. Fern clung to me. Cecile looked more like a secret agent than a mother, but I knew she was Cecile, and I knew she was our mother. Are you, the stewardess unfurled the crumpled slip of paper, Cecile Johnson? She paused heavily between the first and the last names. Are these the colored girl's mama? Cecile looked at us, then at the stewardess. I'm Cecile Johnson. These, she motioned, are mine. That was all the stewardess needed to hear, and she dropped the slip of paper on the floor, littering, by the way, handed us over, and fled away on her wobbly high heels. Cecile didn't bother to grab any of our bags. She said, come on. Took 2 wide steps and we came. The gap between Cecile and us spread wider and wider. Ooh, that seems symbolic. Vanetta sped up, but was annoyed that she had to. Fern could only go so fast with her bag in one hand and Miss Pattycake in the other. And I wasn't going anywhere without Vanetta or Fern, so I slowed down. Cecile finally turned as she got to the glass doors and looked to see where we were. When we caught up, she said, y'all have to move if you're going to be with me. Fern needs help, I told her, and then Fern said, I do not, and Vanetta said, I need help. Cecile's face had no expression. She swooped down, grabbed Fern's bag handle, and said, y'all keep up. She started walking, the same wide steps as before. I took Fern's hand and we all followed. The gap wasn't as wide as when we first started out, but there was distance between Cecile and my sisters and me. Mobs easily threaded through and around us. You couldn't see that we were even together. So like here, Cecile had no expression. There was distance between Cecile and my sisters and me. What was this all showing about the reunion here? This is kind of showing like, yeah, they're together, but that gap is really wide. That's a symbolic gap too. They are not really close family, especially given all that's happened. It's going to take some mending to have a good relationship again. There was something uncommon about Cecile. Eyes glommed onto her tall, dark brown woman in man's pants face, which was half hidden by a scarf, hat, and big dark shades. She was like a colored movie star, tall, mysterious, and on the run. Mata Hari in the airport. Except there weren't any cameras or spies following the colored, broad-shouldered Mata Hari. Only 3 girls trailing her from a slight distance. We followed her outside, where green and white caps lined up. Instead of us going to the first cab in the line, Cecile ducked her head and searched every other cab. It was at the 4th cab that she bent down and rapped against the window. The driver, wearing a black beret, leaned over, nodded, unlocked the front door, and said something like Zilla, which I guessed was short for Cecile in a colored Oakland way. Cecile opened the back door. Come on. I asked, can we put our bags in the... Girl, will you get in this car? Vanetta and Fern stiffened. Big Ma could be hard, and Papa didn't play around, but no one talked to me like that. It was just as Big Ma had said. We were in a boiling pot of trouble cooking. Still, there was no time to soothe my pride. I had to make everything all right for Vanetta and Fern so that they'd fall in line. Wow, this was a critical moment here. I got in first with my bag, pulling Fern in with me while she held on to Miss Pattycake, and then Vanetta got in with her bag. Cecile and the cab driver lit up cigarettes as we drove on. At least Papa doesn't smoke his Viceroys in the Wildcat. Vanetta coughed and Fern looked green. I didn't bother to ask what I could and could not do. I cranked down my window to let the air in. Man, I'm thinking it would be tough to be Delphine here. Always having to set that example for her siblings, she had to make everything right for Vanetta and Fern so that they'd fall in line. She is careless and sacrificing her own opinions often at the expense of her siblings. This is a really nice thing about Delphine. We were quiet, riding along, gazing out the windows at Oakland and stealing looks at Cecile. Before I could get a thought going about Cecile or Oakland, the cab driver let us out not too far from the airport. You live near the airport, Vanetta asked. Cecile didn't answer. She just said, come on. As we walked, she hid deeper into her hat and shades like she didn't want anyone to see her with us. Was she ashamed that she had 3 girls she'd left behind and had to explain? Who are these girls? Yours? Why don't they live with you? Don't expect no pity from us. We were asked the same questions in Brooklyn. Where's your mother? Why doesn't she live with you? Is it true she died? Cecile placed Fern's suitcase on the bench of a bus stop and sat down. Why are we taking the bus? Vanetta asked. Why didn't the cab take us? I shushed Vanetta just to keep Cecile from saying something mean. By my Timex, the bus came in 4 minutes. Cecile made us get in first and said, go all the way down to the back and sit down. When we found seats, Cecile was still with the bus driver, arguing with him. 10 and under, ride free, she said. Now give me 4 transfers. I had been 11 for a good while, standing tall, but I said to Vanetta and Fern, if anyone asks, I'm 10. Vanetta folded her arms. Well, I'm still 9, and I'm not going back to 8. Fern said, I'm staying 7. I hushed them both. A lot of good it would do the bus driver if he heard us getting our ages straight. Tell the truth, it was Cecile I was worried about, not the driver. We didn't have to stay with the bus driver. So the setting here is changing a little bit. They're in Oakland with Cecile, and it seems like this new chapter or part of the text is it's going to begin here. This kind of sets the stage. This bus ride, we're going to be arriving somewhere new in just a moment, probably Cecile's house. And like she said, they didn't have to stay with the bus driver for the next 28 days. They had to stay with Cecile. So just to quickly recap who was in the chapter, this is where we had Cecile come in as the character. She's not the mother that the girls envisioned. She presents new experiences that the girls would not be expecting. What seems important? What am I learning about the problem here? Well, the girls are treated in a certain way in the airport, which is part of the larger problem. The way that Cecile treats them, so distant and detached, is also an issue. And how does this chapter connect to what I read earlier? This experience meeting Cecile connects to earlier in chapter 1 when we learned all the details about her abandoning them and also about how Pa feels about her doing this. So the last question here, what does this chapter reveal about Cecile? How is she different from Big Ma? Using details, let's think about the answer, using details from the text to support our response. Okay, boys and girls, that was a long one, but we did it, and we got through chapters 2 and 3. On to chapter 4 next time.